Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Hope everyone is doing good and that everyone's safe and healthy. It's looking like things are starting to come around. Things are slowly starting to open, at least in some states. Hope everyone's doing okay. Welcome to the channel. This is Chris, your host with Shadows Techland. So I wanted to go over security and various options that you may have. The main topic for today is going to be firewalls and the differences between why I think you should have one, what they provide, and what you should be looking for basically. So nowadays basically there's a lot of options out there. There's a lot of consumer routers that you can get. Personally myself, I don't use them, and there's a few reasons for that, depending on, of course, your situation. A lot of providers will give you a basically wireless router, little box. It's kind of like an all-in-one unit that has the connections that go in from the provider and also has security, things of that nature. But I am very against using those due to the fact of privacy and how locked down they are. When it comes to a lot of providers, especially the big ones like Comcast, Spectrum, basically a lot of the big ones in a lot of the big markets, if you use any of their consumer routers, which there is a difference, you can do either just the modem, which literally all it is just a modem that provides the internet and phone to your house, or you can do the all-in-one. The all-in-one is the modem that also provides the wireless abilities that you would be using, which then essentially you're using a GIMP router. And what I mean by a GIMP router is the fact that those routers that you do get that are the all-in-one units, they are very, very extremely locked down. Most of the features you don't have access to, and even if you did want to set up network area translation, so NAT, if you wanted to do any port forwarding, a lot of those won't work. Even if you do port forward it, you're not able to forward and get in correctly and can have connection issues. There's just a lot of issues with that, and even if you have a business account with the provider, a lot of times to use a lot of those basic features that you would get into, you're not able to without calling the provider. And a lot of them are even firmware locked. So they have special firmware that they've baked into those routers to where you have almost no ability to do anything. So there's option one. Option two is you can go and you can get a consumer router. Now you can get anything from, a $50 pick a brand, TP-Link, Netgear, any of those. And you can get one, and chances are you'll be okay as an average consumer. Now, where you start to run into some of the issues that you may have, if you have, let's say, a lot of kids in your house, that they have, nowadays everyone's got a console, everyone's got a computer, everyone's playing some sort of PC game, streaming, things of that nature, you're starting to get into where you need more features and you need more ability to open up ports. And basically what a port is it is a section of your firewall that you open that says this particular IP address to this particular port/service has the ability to connect into your network. So as an example, let's say you have a console. If you have a router, security appliance of some nature, you will have to open certain ports for like Xbox Live, PlayStation Network to work. Let's say you have a media server or things that you're hosting at home. Each of those individual services need to have ports open. Well, depending on I hate to say it, depending on the amount of money that you spend on the router will determine how much features and how many ports and things that you can open. If you get a little cheapy $30, $40 router, then that may work for your particular needs, but you're going to be limited as to what you can use. Now, I've been doing a lot of reading, and I've seen there's been a lot of firmware and there's been a lot of security concerns with the major vulnerabilities that have been found in security appliances. And that's anywhere from your Netgear to your Linksys to your Cisco to anything basically in between. Personally, myself, several years ago, I moved away from consumer routers and I built my own firewall security appliance, which is a dedicated computer that I have built that runs various software firewalls that I have used over the various 10 plus years probably. I've used quite a few different ones. I've tested a lot of different ones. Obviously, once again, your mileage may vary. I personally like running a security appliance that I built myself because I get exactly what I want. Now, having a router that you buy through a store, Netgear, if you buy even a high-end one, you're still limited as to what they give you. If you go with a security appliance, which there's numerous various options out there, you get a lot more options as to what you can use. I've used, quite a few different ones. I've used smooth wall, I've used mono wall, a couple other ones in between. I ended up going to Untangle late 2000s, so I think like 2008, 2009-ish, I started going with Untangle. I used that for quite a few years, liked it quite a bit. The only reason that I moved away from Untangle is the fact that a lot of the packages, the special packages that you would want to get require subscription basis, which someone like myself, who's a home labber, I don't exactly want to have to pay for a lot of features that I want to test that may or may not work for my needs, so why should I have to pay for that? That business model, which is basically, it's more geared towards SOHO, so your small businesses, few employees to a couple hundred employees, smaller companies. I decided to move over to Pfsense, which is what I've been using now for quite a long time, gone through numerous releases with Pfsense, and I've liked it a lot. Obviously, your mileage will vary. Not saying that one is better than the other. You have to basically look at what works for you. This is what I've been using, and this works tremendously well for me and my needs, and basically all the services and special packages that I would like to use have been free, and they've been extremely rock solid and extremely easy to use. Not saying Untangle is bad, it's just I decided to move over, and this is basically where I'm at this point in time. Now, when it comes to Pfsense, within the last, I want to say 2, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. Correct me if I am in the comments below. The last couple releases, they have gone ahead and upped the requirements for CPU. So if you're running much older hardware just for testing, your mileage will vary and it may not be acceptable in the newer releases. And the reason for that is if you were starting to get into VPN services and using IPsec security for your VPNs, then you will definitely have to look at a little bit higher grade CPUs. Not saying you have to get like some crazy dual Xeon setup or something of that nature, but you need to make sure that you are using a CPU that is accepted, and I will leave a link in the description for the documentation to look that up. Now, the next thing, when it comes to, I don't care what provider or what software suite that you're going with, you need to make sure that your CPU and your hardware will work for your bandwidth usage. If you were using like the standard 60 to 100 meg connection that probably most of the United States is using at this point, unless you're in very rural areas or very small towns that don't have a lot of providers, that's a different story. Now, if you're using like 60 to 100 meg internet connection, then you should be fine with most hardware that you're laying around. You could probably set up like a low end. I started actually on a Pentium 4, moved up to a Core 2 Duo. It really just depends on your bandwidth usage. Another thing that you also have to consider when you're speccing out your firewall of what you're deciding to go with is what packages you are going to be using. If you're going to go basically with like a basic install, then you should be fine with lower end hardware, i3, something of that nature. i5 probably would be fine. But once you start getting into like IPS, which is intrusion protection system, and then also intrusion detection system, if you start using some of those special packages, which I'll go into, then you will start to run into needing more requirements. I have went ahead and I installed Pfsense on a virtual machine just for privacy concerns, obviously for my safety. I didn't want to log into my own personal one, but I will go through everything and show that with you as a quick overview. Hopefully this video doesn't get too crazy long, so let's go ahead and basically take a look at everything. So when you were doing your install, I just basically left it as the default, so you know what keyboard you're going to want, things of that nature. It'll do the install. It will install to whatever storage media you're using, whether it's an SD card, USB device, hard drive, etc. After that, once you install and you reboot it and it boots in, it's going to come basically to this page here, which is what you see on the screen now. The reason why you only see one IP address is, once again, this is in just a virtual machine. You should see, obviously, two IP addresses, the WAN being your internet, which is what is coming in from your provider, and then, of course, your LAN address, which is what everything connects to. And then also, if you're doing virtual LANs or anything of that nature, once it first boots, it's going to ask you what NICs that you want to use, what interfaces. So if you have multiple, either a motherboard that has multiple interfaces, or if you have several cards installed, at that point in time it will give you the option to set up which interface is going to be WAN, which interface is going to be LAN, do you have multiple providers, and if you have virtual networks set up. Once you do that, then it will basically come to this screen here, which will allow you to, if you need to assign any more addresses, if you need to reboot, ping if you need to do any troubleshooting, and then updates and things of that nature. At that point in time, it is going to give you, one sec, I have too many things open right now. Then it will bring you to a login screen, which the login, I believe, will be admin, and then Pfsense for the password, and then it's going to give you a first-time welcome screen. Go ahead and hit next. Basically, support is available if you wanted to purchase Netgate support, which is the developer that Pfsense comes from. At that point in time, this is where you would go ahead and put in your firewall stats. So whatever your DNS primary server would be, for an example, what you want the host name to be. This is where you can also go ahead and do your time zones. And then, do you want to have DHCP for your LAN, your WAN, IP addresses? Do you need any statics? Do you need any special configurations? And then if you wanted to change the password from the default. Once that's taken care of, it's going to reload the window. And then your first welcome screen, at this point in time, you will go ahead and this is what you'll be looking at. So you will get your name, the user that's logged in, system, this Netgate device ID. This is what you would use and you would need to provide if you have any troubleshooting needs that need to be done from the developer. It will also give you your BIOS information here, which obviously this is virtual machine, so that's what you would see is the virtual BIOS that you chose. Currently, at this point in time, the making of this video, I do believe the latest release is 2.4.5, which is also based off of FreeBSD 11.3 stable at this point. You would also get your uptime, current date, and then the DNS servers that you have on your network, so your provider. If you're using Pi-hole or anything of that nature, down below here you'll get your CPU usage, memory, how much swap space is being used, disk space, and then how much memory is in your RAM. Lots that you can do with this. There is a tremendous amount of configurability. This scales very well, in my opinion, when it comes anywhere from basically testing at home to small businesses. I definitely highly recommend this product. I've used it for quite a while. The web configuration, this is basically where you would change this from using HTTP to HTTPS secure website. I'd highly recommend not putting this out publicly on the internet. If you needed to access it, I would do it over VPN. And then you set that up that way. You can do secure shell servers, login protection, lots that you can do here. If you need to do anything with firewall or NAT, there's definitely quite a bit of configuration you can do here. You can do static timeouts. Network interface options, so disable checksum, things of that nature. There's also system tunables to where you can tune this even more to your special needs. Let's say like you're building out 10 gig network, things of that nature, you would definitely be using some of the options in here. Under general setup, this is where you can configure internal DNS servers that you might have. Various themes and widgets and host names that you can put in here, so what theme that you want to be able to see. Next thing I'll go over really quickly is Package Manager. So the first thing you'll see here is installed packages, and then available packages. There's a pretty extensive list that can be used. Various monitoring, you can do bind, bandwidth monitoring, cellular, if you wanted to add like a MiFi or something of that nature. Free Radius server if you wanted to set up secure login through Radius for your wireless networks. Light Squid, you can do Squid for like proxy web caching, which I definitely do myself and is pretty awesome. I love it a lot. One of the nice packages that I do like is PF Blocker. PF Blocker, you can download that, and I definitely recommend looking up the setup guide. That's not something I will go over, but basically by setting up PF Blocker and PF Blocker NG, if you set those up, that's basically the equivalent of Pfsense's Pi-hole. So it's basically to where you can set up block lists. I personally don't use it because I ran into issues. Personally, I think it was probably I had an issue with one of the lists that I didn't feel like going through. So I just found it easier to use Pi-hole, so I'm using that. Obviously, your mileage will vary. I just didn't take the time to look into it to fix it, so that's not on the package. That's probably something that I set up incorrectly. You can use Snort or other various tools basically for IDS and IPS monitoring. Now, do keep in mind, like I said previously, if you are using that, that's where you would start to run into more resources that you would need and that you would need to look into in order to make sure that you have the correct hardware. Squid, which is what you can use basically for setting up web caching. to where you can cache a certain amount of space of websites for internal browsing to make things quicker. I use it quite a bit on mine. I have gone ahead and gone between Squid and Surika for monitoring IPS and IDS. Again, your mileage will vary. It doesn't work very well unless it is set up correctly, so you'll definitely need to look into that in order to get everything set up correctly. Now, you do have the ability to install Telegraph or Zabbix or any of the other monitoring tools that you can basically hook into Grafana or whatever, Prometheus, whatever it is that you want to use for monitoring and setting up that way. And then under interfaces, where you could go to assignments, and this is basically where you can set up your various lags, which would be bonded networks, bridges. You can set up VLAN, virtual networks, wireless if you wanted to have wireless on your Pfsense as well. Not saying that you can't do that, but you definitely can. I have mine set up through Ubiquity using a AC Lite, which is a wireless AC access point, which is extremely awesome. I very much do recommend them. They are very awesome products. And then underneath firewall, this is net. This is basically where you can do port forwarding for your various networks that you have set up. Well, like I said earlier, to where you can set up for like Xbox Live, things of that nature. You can set up ports to allow various services to go through. Now, you can do that through NAT if you need to do like IP forwards, or if you just want to do like basic firewall rules, you can just go into rule. Really, really simple. So you just hit add. You're going to hit pass, the interface that it's for. Do you want IPv4 or do you want 6 or both? What protocol that you would need? The source, which usually in most cases is probably any. And then you can do either a whole entire network. You can do a specific host if you need to. So then you put in the IP address, the port, description, and then just click add, and you're good to go. Don't need to reboot, anything of that nature. You can also do traffic shaping if you need to do like QoS for you need higher bandwidth during certain times for certain protocols. So like example, if you wanted to do like torrents or something of that nature, you can set them up to where they only have like certain times that they're able to go ahead and go through, and at certain times only a certain amount of bandwidth will go through. You can set up schedules. And then underneath services, basically DHCP relay, that would be if you have your DHCP server like on another server on the network or another device that's handling that, then you would set up relays. Then DHCP server itself, this is basically where you would set up your pools for whatever it is that you are needing for your various networks. Obviously mileage will vary depending on what you need. Same thing with forwarder and resolver. It all depends on what you're having your firewall. Is this going to be this Pfsense box? Is it going to be your gateway? So basically all it is just a filter. Or is this thing going to be handling filtering and firewalling and routing and everything? So it really all depends on what it is that you're building on, what it is you need to get set up. Now, one of the things that I really, really do like about Pfsense is that it has OpenVPN built right in. There's definitely a lot of guides out there in order to set that up. So basically you can have an OpenVPN server set up to where you can set it up, allow the forwarding, allow the virtual network for the VPN. That way, let's say you're traveling for work or just traveling in general or in another location, you can basically grab the client, grab the profile for the client, install it, and then you can basically VPN back home right into your firewall, and then you're on your network, and then you can access the needed sources that you were basically using. This is very, 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 very powerful software. I like it tremendously a lot. I've used it for quite a while. I find it very stable, very easy to use, and basically it's pretty straightforward. I'm not saying that other products aren't as good, but that's just my personal opinion and a basic overview of how Pfsense works and what it is basically that you're looking at. Underneath diagnostics, this is where you can do authentication, backup and restore, another thing that I like that I've used quite often. Back up the whole entire configuration, and you can restore it if needed if you run into any problems or if you need to do any troubleshooting. Hold system for basically shutting it down. Ping, reboot, your basic network tools. Tracer out, more network tools that you can basically use to look at. There's a lot of documentation. One of the things that I do also like about Pfsense is it's a really active community, a great community for forums, and just a great community for getting releases coming out. From what I've heard, there's another big release coming pretty soon that has a lot of very interesting, good features in it. I know I kind of briefly went over everything pretty quickly. There's basically what I went over is barely scratching the surface of what this thing is capable of. If you have any other questions, definitely feel free to reach out to me on my social media and I will try to answer them for you. And I do appreciate your guys' support and hope you guys have a great day. Make sure that you hit the subscribe and like button for future videos. Thanks.